Now, let's start with the basics. What is autism?
So autism is a developmental disorder that affects children, and these children who are affected usually present with difficulties in socialization, in communication, and unusual behaviors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, if you're a parent, and I'm sure for people watching at home, they would wonder what causes it. You know, can it be looked at from that kind of lens? What causes autism, and what can be done to prevent it?
So from what we know, autism is actually a neurologic disorder. So
Yes.
what happens is that during the brain formation, something goes wrong. So like the brain gets an insult, and then the connectivities between the neurons in the brain fail to connect correctly. And so you'll find variances in how the brain functions when that has happened.
Right.
And sometimes you end up with autism.
Okay, so I mean, for most people who have seen or experienced someone close to them with autism, it wouldn't be apparent from just looking at someone or interacting with them or at a surface level. So what would a parent look out for in terms of symptoms or red flags?
Okay, so what happens is most parents come to us for a diagnosis a little too late.
Okay.
But we are able to pick up signs of autism in even very young children. So as young as even children under 1 year, you can find that this child is already showing difficulties in socialization. Like you smile at them, they don't smile back.
Okay.
They don't use gestures. They have a lot of repetitive movements, like with the hands, with the head. They keep shaking their heads. Or they're just unusually agitated. That would be a child who is yet to speak, but yet you can still pick up signs of autism. Once they get a little older, they start manifesting with now speech delay. Most of the concerns we see in parents, when parents bring us kids, is speech delay. And sometimes they also have issues with socialization. So these are children who want to play alone. They hardly want to engage with other children. They're children who don't respond socially to the usual social cues of conversations. So you speak to them, they may not respond. You call their name, they may not respond, or they may respond in an unusual way.
Okay.
So once you pick up that, it's a red flag. And then as far as communication is concerned, of course, some children with autism may be actually verbal.
Okay.
They may be able to speak. And so we also assess the quality of the communication that they have. Some may have just single word conversations. Some may have full phrase conversations. Some may be actually conversational. But still, even within the conversations, you can pick up that this child either has very restricted interests or they tend to focus on specific topics or to use a very different tone to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when most of us know of autism as just that word, autism, but it's actually autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
Why the spectrum? Because to me, it sounds like it implies a range in terms of severity. Explain the spectrum and how this affects how someone can cope in real life. Okay.
So previously what used to happen is that we had a lot of descriptions of different conditions that would manifest similarly. So they all had issues with social skills, they all had issues with communication, and then behavior issues. But then over time, some of these orders were actually considered to be very similar. And so around about 2013, they were all merged up to be called one term. So like all children who had Asperger's syndrome, children who are classified as pervasive disorders or just autism, they were all lumped together as just being on one spectrum where you have different levels of functioning. So we do have like 3 levels of functioning within autism.
Okay.
So level 1 usually are the children who are able to have higher skills in terms of their socialization is way better. So they may be a bit socially awkward, but they can be able to initiate some social relationships. And then the communication, some of them are actually verbal. And their IQ usually is a little closer to normal, or even more than normal. And then the other extreme is level 3s. Level 3s are usually the children who are more severely affected. So their conversations mainly tend to be non-verbal children.
Okay.
They don't initiate any social interactions or give any social cues. And most times their cognitive skills are very low. So they have associated intellectual disabilities.
Right. Now this is Africa, and I'm sure there are certain beliefs associated with autism. As a doctor, what have you encountered and what would you like to dispel?
So there are a lot of myths, as you say.
Yes.
Very many myths. A lot of children are actually hidden away.
Okay.
Because there's too much stigma around autism in our communities. Some people have associated autism with curses, with witchcraft, with like cultural taboos that the parents did and led to their autism. So, and because of that, it's left a negative connotation in the society. And sometimes parents having children with autism want to hide them away.
Okay.
And they tend to isolate themselves because they don't want to face the world, because the world thinks differently about them. They don't understand why their child is different. Yeah, but the key thing is for parents to understand that it is neurologic. They had nothing to do with what happened to the child. And society needs to begin to embrace them better. Yeah.
Right. What does it do to a child with autism when they're isolated? Because they have medical needs, they have education needs, but then if they're stuffed away somewhere because of shame, what happens then? What do they miss out?
Unfortunately, that's a very common scenario.
Yeah.
And what happens is that even a child who had potential to be stimulated and to learn skills, then they are not able to do any new skills. They're not able to learn. So isolating children denies them opportunities for early intervention, denies them opportunities to go to school, and therefore just does not give them an opportunity to reach their potential.
Yeah.
And yet they're capable of reaching their full potential if they are stimulated.
So let's talk about also the system in terms of medical needs in Kenya. Some strides have been made so far in Kenya. Speak to us about that, and what would you like to see happen in the accommodation of this condition and treatment?
So I'll speak from the perspective of healthcare.
Yeah.
So we have systems put in place, especially, let me start talking about the public system.
Yes.
So we have a clear referral pathway where parents can actually begin to access care right from the low levels, the primary healthcare level. There are all the facilities, actually all health workers at the primary healthcare level ought to know something about milestones, developmental milestones. And they need to be able to do monitoring of these milestones. And when they identify a child who has an issue, they're supposed to refer that child to the next level of care. And there they're probably going to meet a medical officer or a pediatrician who then may be able to do more detailed screening to understand whether really, what is the extent of the developmental delays in this child, and could they be on the autism spectrum. And most children are able to be diagnosed then and intervention started. The only challenge that is there currently is, again, most of these facilities do not have adequate interventions for these children once they are diagnosed. So children get diagnosed and probably don't get adequate intervention. Just a few of them may reach the referral centers, so then they get to meet people like us who then handle the diagnostics, trying to understand what caused this child to have autism and what are the associated developmental conditions and other conditions that they tend to have, because autism tends to have a lot of associated comorbid disorders.
Such as?
So those include things like seizures, sleep disorders, feeding disorders, other psychiatric manifestations, so like oppositional defiant disorders or obsessive compulsive disorders. So we see lots of different comorbid disorders which sometimes have not been diagnosed in a lower level, and children need to come to see like specialist or a pediatrician who is familiar with this condition to be able to recognize some of these things. Okay,
but these children, despite their challenges, are not unintelligent, for a lack of better words, right? Explain to us some of the inspirational things you've seen from autism children, children with autism.
So the interesting thing, most of our population knows autism as low functioners, like their intelligence is really low. But the truth be told, the IQ levels varies greatly on the spectrum. So some children in level 1 have exceptional intellectual skills, and they're able to do way more than even what typical children can do. But besides that, we also see a lot of servant skills in autism. So those are children who have exceptional skills despite their not so high IQ levels, but you find that they're able to do very exceptional things, like they can memorize lots of number plates.
Oh, wow.
They can calculate for you the date of your birth just by telling you, like, you're born on a Monday. So they master the calendar very well. They may be very good with arts, with music. So they have very good talents that when nurtured well, they can be used to, make a vocation for these children.
Yeah, and channeled in a certain direction.
And actually, we have a lot of scientists whom now we know they were actually autistic.
Okay.
And some of the things they discovered were because they were actually on the spectrum.
Quirks, right?
Yeah.
Really interesting. But in order for these things to be taken seriously and their care, education, we have to understand the prevalence. So speak to us about the prevalence rates in Kenya and, of course, the continent.
So globally, we are seeing a rise in autism. So we don't have local statistics, but most of the data that we have is from the Western world.
Okay.
In the US, they are recording rates as high as 1 in every 36 children are on the spectrum. The WHO official rate currently is 1 in 100.
Wow.
For us in the developing world, we expect that this rate might be much higher. So we probably are closer to what the US rates are, or even worse off, because clinically we are seeing a lot more children coming with autism. Part of that is just probably because more awareness is happening. We have more children getting to be diagnosed at least. And then also we suspect that probably environmental factors are changing and thus impacting how the genes of these children are manifesting.
Right.
Yeah. So that's still an area under research.
That's very, very interesting. But I mean, as we look forward in terms of schools, I mean, can they actually function in the school setup in Kenya, or do we need to be making more accommodations for them?
So the abilities and functionality of children on the spectrum is very varied.
Yeah, that's it.
There's some who are super intelligent, and yet they're put in a normal school and they're supposed to be coping with that normal schooling.
Right.
And it becomes a big burden to them because they want to do more.
Yes.
And so
they can do more.
Yeah. Because the system does not support those kind of children who are exceptional. On the other extreme, we have those who have very low functionality. And so these children can not cope in a normal school. The overall policy currently is that we integrate children. The challenge that we're experiencing is that most of the schools that integrate children don't give adequate support.
Yeah.
And they don't give individualized attention to these children because these children are also very different. So you find that children, some of them are getting supported adequately, some are actually not receiving adequate support. And so most of the parents actually prefer to even have their children in mainstream schooling and with supports. So they lobby for those supports. And that's what we should actually be lobbying for, that even those in normal schools should be supported.
Okay. Yeah. Or homeschooled if they
parents can. Or homeschooled if they can afford, because that's another option.
Okay. Yeah. Now, as we wind up, I'm interested in finding out whether the statistics that you've just mentioned are owing to us being more keen on autism, or is there something in our environment or in today's world that is making the numbers go up? What would you say?
Looking at our own experiences locally, we are seeing actually rising numbers of autism. But as I said, we are not clear whether it is environmental or it's genetic. But we do know that in the low-income countries, we're having a lot more risk factors that are predisposing children to autism.
Such as?
So like pregnancy-related problems, birth-related problems are much higher in the low-income countries.
Okay.
We have a lot of exposures, toxins. Children are exposed to a lot of toxin because of pollution from all different sources. We have lots of different infections in our region. And so all these factors interact with their genetic potential, and we end up having more autistic children.
All right.
So that's one of the thoughts. But of course, we're also looking at, we have better diagnosis now. More people are getting more aware. So, and we're hoping that awareness will be carried forward and more people will be aware of what is autism.
Okay, thank you so much. That is Dr. Florence Oringe, who's a specialist in matters autism. And of course, the bottom line is a lot can be done to ensure children with autism are raised in a way that they can live functional lives and be productive members of their countries. Now, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Draws Africa Speaks to a conclusion. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Trix Ingada. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing.